sometimes people have masterful moments at the very beginning. You could have a brand new coach and they could ask a really powerful question or have a really powerful experience. But it's being able to sustain it. That's when you start to get to mastery. When I looked at that 2,500 hours and was logging it from the very beginning, I was like, okay, I just have to keep remembering, I will get there. I will get there. I just thought, okay, the next 10 or the next 20. And then all of a sudden it started to expand where it was the next 50 or the next 75. So it started to grow, and that was really helpful.
Welcome to Warriors at Work. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. Warriors at Work is a place where everyone in the workplace can come together, gain insight, encouragement, tell stories, connect, and share wisdom. We are a place of like-minded people at different stages of life, all coming together with a shared interest of enlightening and inspiring one another. If you're interested in going from the predictable to the potent, and you want to find your warrior magic, step into the journey with us. Welcome to Warriors at Work. Thank you, everybody, for being here with me. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host at the Warriors at Work podcast. The whole month of May, I am focused on words and attributes like mastery, motivation, mentoring, meaning, magic. And I'm inviting guests to share their stories and experiences around those words. And today is all around finding your mastery. So the very first person I thought of is a dear friend and colleague I've known for my entire coaching career, Lynn Schaber, 16 years. And she has achieved Master Certified Coaching designation, which is a really big deal in the coaching world. And I invited her into this conversation to share her wisdom, how she did it, why she did it, what does really mastery mean to her. And you're going to quickly learn it is not a destination. It is not about perfection. It's not about figuring out one day like, wow, I made it. Here I am. I'm a master. It really is not about that. And she is so open and honest and giving in this conversation. And so I'm so grateful to be able to bring this to you. Enjoy. Welcome to Warriors at Work podcast. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host on this journey. I am so thrilled to have this woman, Lynn Schaber, with me. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being in this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Jeannie. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
So, Lynn, I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you, this idea of finding mastery. And what all the listeners and people that are watching have no idea is how long of a history we have. So I want to rope that into this intro before we get into this conversation, because I was reflecting on all of the things that come to mind when I think of you. So I've known Lynn my entire coaching journey. Very early on, we were both getting certified around the same time, and we became fast friends. And you've been a confidant of mine for many, many years. We've had the opportunity to work together, share a lot of experiences with one another. And here are the things that I think about when I think of Lynn Schaber. So obviously, she is this master certified coach, which I'm going to talk about what a big friggin' deal that is in just a minute. She's the immediate past president of the New Jersey Professional Coach Association. She's a virtual group coaching guru. This woman is masterful at group coaching in a virtual setting. You're a mom, you're a wife, you're a grandmother, you're a friend. You're also my velvet hammer. If ever I want to know something very directly and very truthfully, Lynn's your woman. And I was laughing thinking about this conversation because you were one of the first people to introduce me to one of my favorite resources, which is Meditations in a New York Minute, and really meditations full stop. And we talked a lot about meditation and spirituality very early on in our friendship. And I had shared with you a lot of my mom's experiences in spirituality. And I remember leaving one of our first conversations thinking, that doesn't sound efficient. meditation and spirituality. Like, how did people rope that into their experience? And then now here I am, 16 years later, having a brand that openly talks about the power of spirituality and soul with strategy and intuition and your gut with intelligence. And I feel like this is so important that here we are in this conversation, and so much of my experience in the world goes back to the early days of knowing you and then sharing in your journey. So I'm so honored and privileged that you're here today with me to have this conversation.
Well, thank you for that. When you talk about all those different tools that you are leveraging now and sharing with others, it makes me think of these are the 21st century tools of warriors at work or warriors, period, right? It's different. And yet, if you look back at traditions, it's been around for centuries. So there
Yeah.
are loads of warriors from different times that have used that ability to center and balance themselves in order to be effective in their leadership roles. So we're sort of behind the times a little bit in getting on top of those types of things, but thank God we learned them, right? And we had somebody bring them to us as a gift.
So when you think about all those things I just said about you,
Mm-hmm.
how do you describe you?
Definitely a coach, a leadership coach, because I love working with people, particularly newer leaders, leaders that are growing quickly, that have new challenges. They're just so much fun to work with. They're so bright. They have a lot to offer. They're excited. They're passionate. So that's really important to me. But I also think, as you are, I'm a learner. I love to learn. I've always loved to learn. And that's so important, particularly today. But I think to be a coach, any coach you really talk to, whether they're a formally trained coach or just a coach at heart, is always learning and growing. And that's what it's all about. That's what mastery is about. It's not about, oh, now I'm a master at this. It's just more of, all right, I've hit this level. So now how do I refine that? How do I massage it? How do I shift it so that I'm using it to be most effective to help my clients?
Yeah, so let's talk about MCC, this Master Certified Coach. So for anybody watching and listening, like, this is the Mac Daddy level of certification in the coaching world. So I remember looking at the profile of what it would take to get to the MCC level. And while I have the hours, the process scared me, where I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So let's talk about what this is. 200 hours of coach specific training, 10 hours of mentor coaching over a minimum of 3 months, and that mentor coach has to be an MCC qualified coach. A minimum of 2,500 hours of coaching, with 2,200 of it being paid. So it's not like you can set this up with all your friends and family. Performance evaluations, which I know you shared with me, that was really, really tough. 2 audio recordings, written transcripts of coaching sessions, and the level of critique that they did, which I know we're going to get into. And you also have to have had a PCC, which is the professional certified coach designation, before you can go for MCC, as well as a coach knowledge assessment. So honestly, it is like the PhD of coaching. It is incredibly difficult to get. So I just want to acknowledge your level of commitment and drive, and being so incredibly focused on this as a goal for you, which really started 16 years ago, which I'd love for you to share the story. You had this in your sights 16 years ago.
I did. It's so funny to think about that. And it took a long time. So a lot of people don't take as long as I took, but everybody has their own journey. And from the time I became a coach, because I, first of all, love the profession, but I met a lot of MCC coaches. I was just fortunate to meet some coaches who were there at the very beginning of when the profession became popular and are wildly successful, but more importantly, had that MCC skill set. And I'm like, I want to be that. I could recognize it even as a brand new coach. I want to be that. And
What did you recognize when you say you recognize the skill? What is it?
it's they heard underneath what people said. They could read between the lines. They could make connections that when they said it, the other person went, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. They could ask questions that made people stop in their tracks and go, oh, I haven't thought about that. You know this. You ask a client a question and they go, oh, that's a really good question. And then they pause and they really think. And that's when you know you got it, because that's when the client's really going to get those insights and find out things that will help them. And I could see it in others in the way they were doing it. They'd ask a question or the way they would ask it, and I'd be like, oh, that's what a master certified coach does.
I would agree. And what you're talking about too, and I completely identify with that. It's that power of a pause. When they sit in a pause or anybody asks a powerful questions and they're not in a rush to push you to an answer. That's also how a really good determinant of a good coach, that they are listening with their entire being. They're not listening with a solution running. They're not listening to pick out certain words, and they're completely comfortable with however long it's going to take for you to answer that question. I thought that's beautiful. You also talked about the strengths that you relied on as you were going through this MCC process, things that were highlighted for you that you knew, oh, I'm very good at this. Here's some things that I needed to get better at. So talk to us about that, because I think that's an important element when you're going for whatever your mastery is, whatever your end goal is. It's the acknowledgement that this is not about perfection. This is about pulling in all the aspects of yourself and having a very holistic experience.
Yep, absolutely. So when you think about mastery, I've said this to you before, sometimes people have masterful moments at the very beginning. You could have a brand new coach and they could ask a really powerful question or have a really powerful experience, but they don't always, it's being able to sustain it. That's when you start to get to mastery. However, for me, first of all, the journey was long. And so one of the things that someone said to me was, one of your strengths is that you're persistent. And that I knew about myself. I'm going to keep going at it and keep going at it. And so when I looked at that 2,500 hours and was logging it from the very beginning, I was like, okay, I just have to keep remembering, I will get there. I will get there. And sometimes it felt like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get there. But I just like thought, okay, the next 10 or the next 20. And then all of a sudden, it started to expand where it was the next 50 or the next 75. So it started to grow, and that was really helpful. And when it got to this point where now you're being evaluated, are you a master certified coach? It's a bit scary, because when you've been coaching for a really long time, you have your routine and your way of doing things and your habits for how you do things. And then you go to a mentor coach and say, okay, help me to get ready so I can do my MCC certification. And they go, in a very nice way, when you're a coach for a while, you tend to get into some habits that don't
So true.
necessarily meet the criteria for what you need to demonstrate in these certification recordings. So I had to really step back and look at what I was doing and understand, in a sense, where I had gotten sloppy or where I could get better. So even learning some skills that new coaches learn that I had forgotten or had never really embedded well. So that was a very powerful experience. And it took me a while, even when I finally said, okay, now I'm ready to go for MCC. I had to go through a coaching program and then an additional coach to really refine it, to get it to a place where it met the criteria. So it's a lot of, if you think about anybody, you think about Tiger Woods in golf, or any sports figure, or anybody, an artist. It's not like instantaneously they're great at what they do, but they're perfecting it all the time.
Like
And
honing the
honing,
skill. Yeah.
Exactly. More than perfecting, honing the skill. And I had to really do that. And I had to be judged. So I had to have people listen to what I did and then say, well, you need to work on this. And then eventually I got to the point where I would like do a recording and go, nope, that didn't work, made mistakes there. So then you get better at even analyzing yourself. But it's a tough process to really have somebody say, here's what you did well and here's what you didn't do well. And coaches are better at that than most people. But it's still hard when you want to think, I'm making an impact on people.
So zoom out for a second because I'm curious and I've never asked you this before. So when you think about where you were in the beginning as a coach and look at where you are now, like what is so different? Is it how you think? Is it how you listen? Is it how you ask questions? So like what is like if you could point to a couple of things, what is the real differential there?
To your point from the beginning, it's really about being able to listen and let everything else go, and to also know when you get distracted. So you know as well as I do, right? You're sitting on a call, especially these days, listening to a client, and you look up and you see something and all of a sudden you go, oh, to be able to bring yourself back really quickly to focus on the client and to even say to the client, you know what, I'm sorry, I got distracted for a minute here. Can you tell me what you said again? So it's being comfortable in that rather than when you're a newer coach, you're going to fake it, right? They're going to say, yeah,
You have your checklist.
can you
You have your
expand a little
checklist.
bit more? Yeah, I got your checklist. I used to have questions on cards all around
Me
me. So I
too.
questions to think about now, right? Um, People have asked recently, what's your favorite question that you ask clients? And I can't think of one that I really ask clients because some of the questions are just so simple that they're not so profound. It's just that they're profound in the timing of when you give it. Not that I'm that profound, but it's profound for the client when you ask that question.
You have an ability to, if you feel as though someone is being harsh to themselves or challenging themselves and sort of talking their way out of something, you're very good at stopping it and saying, okay, hold on. And you can frame a question in a very powerful and succinct way. And I've seen you stop people dead in their tracks because of your unbelievable skill to be able to do that. And then also being able to watch and witness about 4 years ago, anybody watching, listening in, for any of you coaches out there, getting into groups with other coaches is one of the most powerful things you can do. It's just getting in a
Yeah.
community with people who are doing what you're doing. And it is not in an effort to compete. It is an effort to be in community and in partnership with one another and recognizing the more we talk, the more we exchange, the better we all get. So about 4 years ago, Lynn was one of the very first people I called to say, hey, can we get into a conversation and create a group and share ideas? So I've been able to witness firsthand how you just gotten tighter and stronger, and you're unbelievable at that skill of just stopping somebody and getting them to see something in a different way. So I share that back to you.
Oh, thank you. It's always interesting to hear people talk about your coaching because you don't realize in the moment that you're doing it. So I appreciate that reflection on what you notice about how I coach.
Yes, you've done it to me, so I know it firsthand. Um, we talked about coaching too as the mastery of skill and heart. So say more about that.
Yeah, so you pointed it really well, right? Coaches who are really invested in their clients are invested in the success of their clients in the sense that they believe in their client. They believe that they have the capabilities to be what it is that they want to be, to overcome the challenges that they want to overcome. And you can't do that mentally. You have to feel that here from the heart. It has to connect there. And people so often are either beating up on themselves or they're having other people give them feedback that makes them feel like they're beating up on themselves.
Mm.
That just to have someone say to you, what I notice about you is that you really care about others or that you have good instincts about others. I find a lot these days in particular, I'm not sure what the reason is, but that I'm always finding a moment when I'm talking with my clients to say to them, you know, what I really appreciate about you is blah, 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 blah. And it lands so well for them because it's like, just like you did to me just now, that you shared, here's what you do that's so effective. Being able to do that with your clients helps them to see their strengths. That's one of the things that we're there to do, is to help reflect back to them their capabilities and their true essence. So I think it is hard. And then the skill piece is a little bit of framework. So that's one of the things I learned as I was going towards mastery, that there's some frames around how you approach a coaching conversation. There's also the whole piece around what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for a coaching conversation. So there is some skill there. I was on a call with a client today, and it was very much like surfing. Like we were going from one thing to another, and we were like going back and forth. But then there was just one question, and when I asked it, he went, "Oh, that's a really good question." You know, like he wrote it down. And so then, you know, you like hit it, but you're not even going to know. It's like surfing. You have to hit the pocket if you want to really ride the wave in all the way. And so it takes a couple different ways, and it takes falling off. It's not like I do it perfectly anytime. I'm always asking questions like, "Oh, well, that question didn't really go over well," or let me try something else. So you're very much in the moment in terms of how to connect with the client. But the heart allows you to connect energetically and to kind of feel where the person is going. It's almost like you're seeing them, but not visually, but from that, what you often talk about, that energetic perspective.
Mm-hmm. Love that. You know, one of the things that we talked about too is mastery is not a destination and
Yeah.
that we're constantly growing. And you shared something with me that I thought was really important for this conversation is you summarized it in three ways about mastery, things that you've learned about mastery. So I'd love for you to share that here.
One of the things I learned even before I was a coach from a leader in my company is that when you start to grow, you will go on this very steep curve, you will plateau, and then you will drop down a little bit. But that as long as you don't get discouraged by that, then you will continue to go up, and you will continue to have this sort of rising, plateauing, dropping, right? But the drop is never back down to where you were before. It's just a little bit of a drop, because that is the insight that allows you to really embed it and go, "Oh, I was doing all this. And then when I stop doing it, I go, oh, that's right. What I was doing over here made really work. So I need to go back to that and then build on that." Um, the courage perspective is really around being willing to take risks. Like, it's risky sometimes to ask clients some questions or to be in that space, and to be willing to take risk with humility, to know that you may not always get it right, and to understand that this process of coaching is not really about me or how wonderful the questions that I ask. It's about being in this interaction with another human being and this exchange, and really then just holding the space for them to be able to grow and learn and have insights in that moment, and to really start to believe in themselves in a different way.
Where do you think your natural abilities and talents around the space come from?
I've always been a good listener. And when I was a kid, I'm the oldest of six children. And we always had adults and family around. And when the adults would start talking at the table about different topics, if I could get really quiet in the corner, I could stay much longer for the conversations than normally they would. So if you made a lot, you know, if you started asking questions or something, oh, they noticed, oh, you're here. You're not supposed to be here during these conversations. You need to leave. But if I got a little quiet and just listened, I was able to listen in longer. And so conversations and people sharing have always been fascinating to me. At
So
one
you
time,
were an eavesdropper. No, I'm
I
just
am,
kidding.
yeah. At one time, I wanted to be Barbara Walters or Oprah
Yeah.
Winfrey. I love to interview and ask people. My family, that's my reputation. Like, they'd bring somebody new home and they'd be like, "Now watch out for my sister Lynn, because she's going to ask you a lot of questions." So that's been my reputation for forever.
I love that. So we talk a lot about in the Warriors at Work community about being in service to one another. And, we're all about creating a movement of doers and thinkers that are elevating and activating the greatest part of ourselves. But in order to do that, we have to hold each other accountable. So who in your community or in your circle keeps you focused on your greatness?
So the coaching group that you talked about is certainly primary. All the coaches in there. I can probably cite a half a dozen situations where I've said, I want to do this and on this time, and they would hold me accountable. One time I was going down to do a talk to a company I'd never done before down in Florida. And Carol and Brenda specifically were both like, you can do this. And they had walked me all through it. And I think they either emailed me or called me before I was going to do it the next day. And they were so supportive and let me know how it goes. So that's just great from that perspective. I think everyone should have even multiple communities. I have multiple coach circles that I belong to. And in different ways, those people really hold me accountable. And I think to some extent, coaches first because they understand the skill set, right? But I also think my clients to some extent hold me accountable too, in the sense that if I don't do a good job with them, if I feel like a coaching conversation fell flat, then I feel disappointed that I didn't really help them or give them what they really needed in that conversation. So it is a two-way street, but I think unconsciously my clients also hold me accountable because I want them to have good experiences from
Hmm.
our conversations.
Where do you see the coaching industry going?
It's a fascinating question, especially right now because of the pandemic. So I did do a lot of virtual work before the pandemic, but now I'm all virtual. You're seeing a lot of organizations who are building an organization where then they hire coaches and then they go to companies and provide coaching. And so that coaching can be provided at all levels of the organization. So people are starting earlier to get that coaching support. So I do see that. I also see certainly it's very international. I do a lot of international work. I work everywhere from Asia to the west coast of California. I think that was there for a while now. Um, and there's a lot, I don't say there's a lot more specialties, but I do find that there's more refinement in terms of the type of coaching that people offer. So there's coaches who do bereavement coaching. There's coaches that do relationship coaching. Certainly health and wellness coaching has become a big priority. So as the needs have grown, the focus for coaches has gotten more distinctive so that people can really find
Mm.
what works best for them.
What are the practices that you use every day to keep you focused and grounded, but also keep you sharp?
So it's so funny you should ask that because I'm in a new program which has a mindfulness technique to it. And so every day I'm taking several times during the day to do some very, very simple mindfulness techniques. Just pay attention to your breathing. Just rub your fingers together so you can feel the ridges in your fingertips. Wiggle your toes. Things
Mm.
that you can do even if you're in a meeting or with someone to kind of bring you back and get you centered in your body. Um, so that has reminded me because I can go up and down the meditation wagon in terms of
Mm.
doing it and not doing it. This has been really powerful in allowing me to be more consistent with doing that. So I think that ability to say, okay, I'm here, I'm in my body, and let me pay attention to what I'm feeling and thinking right now is really important. When you're in a meeting with a client, like I do it automatically when I'm with a client, but you should be doing it in other parts of your life too, so that you're paying attention to what's going on in the rest of your life. So it's been really powerful for that. I try to find something to read every day that inspires me. I
What are you reading
just
now?
It's not anything specific in terms of books. It's more like little pieces of things. Like my desk is cluttered in a sense with all different types of reminders. Like insight alone does not lead to change. You also need to take action. So often it's just little blips of things that I'm reading. I have about 3 or 4 different books going at one time. And I just opened a book that I read a long time ago, but it's more along the spiritual pathway of what I read. So I will recommend, though, if you like want a quick pick up these, and I know that Marianne
I
told you
have
about
that. Postcards from
these.
Spirit.
Yeah, Postcards from
Postcards from
Spirit.
Spirit.
I love these.
Colette Baron Reed. I absolutely love it.
Aren't
I've
they
been doing
great?
it every single day, and I always giggle about the messages.
Yep.
So for anybody on audio and video, check it out. Get it from Amazon. It is fantastic. A daily practice.
Yes, it's really wonderful. And I told Marianne about them, and that's how she started. And then she said she told you.
Yep.
And I've used them with clients. So I've said to a client, so, all right, I'm going to just start shuffling these on the phone. I'm going to start shuffling these. Tell me when to stop. I pull a card and then I read it and they go, oh my God, I can't believe you picked that. That's such the perfect message for me today. They're connected to the energy of the universe somehow. And
They're
always the
postcards
right
from
message.
Spirit.
They're postcards from
Makes
Spirit.
sense. Which is all about this idea of being in your mastery journey. You know, this is more information. Pull on all the resources. Why just look at one thing? If we know that this is more than just an intellectual journey, look at everything.
Yeah.
Which this is my ending question for you. And I ask this of every guest. When you think about your own warrior journey, because you're a part of this community as well, what are you working on? Like, what are you looking to create more of? And what do you still struggle with?
So, what I'm working on right now is getting really tightly focused on what's the most important thing that I want to work on right now. So, I've been saying for a really long time, I'm a leadership and executive coach, and I've worked with executives and I've worked with leaders at several levels of the organization. And I'm moving much more towards the leadership coach piece because that's where I work. I work in how to be a better leader, how to communicate better. So I'm getting tighter in terms of my messaging about where my primary focus is, and working more with groups like a leadership development program. So I've been working with another colleague on really refining that. What was the other part? It was
What are you struggling with?
what am I
What are you,
struggling with?
yeah, like, what are you trying to get better
Yeah.
at?
Being kind to myself, loving
Mm.
myself, and giving myself a break. Because it's like I'm on the treadmill. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. I need to get this done. Like, no, okay. You're tired. It's the end of the day. This stuff will still be here tomorrow. You don't have to get it out tonight. Close and go relax. So I'm really trying to set more boundaries so that I'm not pushing myself quite so hard because it's not effective.
Another piece of wisdom. Lynn, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, your experience with me, and with everybody listening and watching. This whole notion of being in the mastery journey. Again, none of us are ever going to be at this place where we're like, that's it, we're done. That's it,
Yeah.
we're done.
Nope.
And I think it's just really, really important. And I'm excited to be able to share this podcast for the month where I'm going to be dedicated to stories of mastery and motivation and mentoring and things that are all key ingredients on our warrior journey. So I'm so appreciative of your time, and being with you is always so fun.
Oh, thank you, Jeannie, and thank you for inviting me. You're doing such wonderful service to the world by these programs, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of Warriors at Work and letting us be a part of your warrior journey. You can ask questions and make suggestions for future topics at jc@jeanniecoomber.com. Connect with me personally on LinkedIn and Instagram, and join us on the Warrior Conversations channel on YouTube and at the Warrior Magic Community page on Facebook. You can find links to all these places on my website, jeanniecoomber.com. And most importantly, be sure to tell friends about us, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spreaker, and Spotify. It helps others find the show and puts more warrior magic out into the world.